How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. We just had a new academic paper come out that's going to blow up all your models. And if you hold Bitcoin, you may be able to retire a lot faster than you thought. I want to walk you through how long it will take you to retire or how much Bitcoin you need to retire based on some different assumptions. Now, this paper, this new academic paper, 33 pages long, it says that Bitcoin can hit 1 million per Bitcoin by January 2027. So just about 2 years away, a 10x. Let's go through this and I'll explain how you would be able to retire. 3 different models, 3 different ways to retire. If you don't mind, hit subscribe, turn on the bell notification underneath the video so you can see future videos just like this. Also, there's a link underneath the video to BTCC where you can trade cryptocurrency if you want to trade Bitcoin, if you want to use leverage or copy trade or just spot trade. If you just want to buy Bitcoin and withdraw it to a cold wallet, you can check out BTCC underneath the video. When you use my link too, you get a 10% deposit bonus on your first time deposit. You get lower trading fees. You get up to 500x leverage. Make sure you understand the risks of leverage. And there's no VPN or KYC necessary. So definitely check that out underneath the video. I think now's a great time to trade. Now, Dennis Porter yesterday announced this new academic paper that shows that Bitcoin is on track to exceed $1 million per Bitcoin by January 2027. Now, what are they looking at exactly? Well, they're looking at the inelastic supply and the demand drivers for Bitcoin. Like the supply is fixed. There's going to be a lot of Bitcoin withdrawn, especially with nation states coming in, with big institutions coming in, with companies coming in. And there's just going to be a spike in price. You know, you have a fixed supply and you have unlimited demand, price goes up. They also go through just, when you withdraw the Bitcoin from the liquid supply and just store it for decades, that shoots up the price. So they think that in a relatively conservative scenario, we could see Bitcoin hit 1 million by late 2028. In a more bullish scenario, we could see Bitcoin hit 1 million as early as January 2027. And they think that we could even see $2 million Bitcoin by 2030 in bullish scenarios too. So you can read this paper if you want. You can go find it on Dennis Porter's Twitter. I summarized it on ChatGPT. That made it a little bit easier to get through because, like I said, this is pretty long and pretty thick. Sorry for that, but it is pretty dense. But of course, you can check it out if you want to read it. So that made me think, okay, well, they are extremely bullish on Bitcoin. What would it take to retire? I like making these videos. How much Bitcoin does it take to retire? How much, Ethereum, Solana, Cardano, and of course there are different assumptions, right? Bitcoin is the easiest to figure out because it's probably going to be here in 5 years, in 10 years, right? There's going to be massive demand for some of these other layer ones. It's hard to know what kind of demand there'll be, where they'll be sitting versus other cryptocurrencies in terms of adoption and technology. So let's just look at Bitcoin here today. Of course, there are different ways to retire on Bitcoin. One that's probably the most obvious is you sell, right? You sell a little bit at a time when the price goes up. Okay, great. A lot of people don't really want to sell their Bitcoin. Of course, you could trade it. Maybe there's going to be easier ways to use it in the future at different locations. So you can just if you have 5 Bitcoin, you can just use a card and it will sell a bit of your Bitcoin each time that you buy something, right? I think there will be more solutions like that in the future, but for the most part, people are just thinking, okay, well, if I have 5 Bitcoin and Bitcoin's at $1 million, I'm going to sell 0.1 Bitcoin a year or something like that. Another thing you can do, something that the wealthy do a lot, you can take loans against your Bitcoin. Not too many people want to do that right now because it is extremely volatile. There aren't a lot of solutions that are very safe, but as banks come in, people feel a little bit more comfortable. As large institutional money managers come in, people feel more comfortable. And of course, I'll get the people in the comments saying that you don't put your Bitcoin on, with a bank, right? Not your keys, not your crypto. So just, there are risks when taking loans against your Bitcoin, but, some people will do this. They'll get a 5% interest rate, 7% interest rate, and the Bitcoin price appreciation will move up faster than the interest will. So some people will do this, especially if you have $10 million worth of Bitcoin and, maybe you have 1 Bitcoin at a bank and you're taking loans against it or something like that. Selling covered calls is another option. Let's say you have something like IBIT or MicroStrategy or something like that. You can actually sell covered calls, which is basically just limiting your upside, and you get paid for that. And IBIT options came recently. This shows right here, if you sold a call with a $90 strike price, okay, $90. So it would be 50% higher than IBIT is right now for about a year and a month out. So we're looking at January 2026. You would get a $10 premium, a little bit over $10. So just to work out the math, you're saying if IBIT goes above $90, I'm willing to sell it, but you need to pay me that opportunity cost. So let's say IBIT goes to $150. So it goes up 2.5x in the next year and a month. I'm willing to sell my IBIT shares for $90. Now, why would I ever do that? Because I get this premium. I get $10 per share today. So actually, you could look at it this way. If you sell a covered call, you would get $10 for every $60 worth of IBIT you have. So just working out the math, if you had 100 shares of IBIT, $6,000, you would get $1,000 of premium here today. And the only reason you would have to give up your IBIT shares is if that $6,000 turned into $9,000 in the next year and a month. So, I mean, that's a pretty crazy return. You're talking about, if I'm doing the math right, 1 divided by 6, what, a 16.6%? 1 divided by 6, yeah, 16.7% return up front. And then if it appreciates by less than 50%, you got to hold on to your shares. So like some people are going to do this, right? Some people won't do it because they think Bitcoin's going to go up more, but like that's a juicy premium. And that's because the volatility is quite high. As Bitcoin's price gets higher, the volatility will be less most likely. So you won't get as fat a premium, but also it'll be less likely that you'll have to give up your shares as well. But you can see why this is attractive, right? Like you get 17% upfront, and then you still get to hold on to everything, all your shares, unless Bitcoin goes up another 50%. So yeah, that's quite attractive to some people. But let's say you just go the first route. You want to keep things simple. You want to just sell a little bit of Bitcoin if the price is right. Well, what would that look like? Okay, we have some different assumptions. Of course, it depends on how much you spend. It depends on where you think Bitcoin's going. So let's say the cost of living is about $70,000. That's what I could find online. And we'll say that you have a safe withdrawal rate of 4%. Basically, there's a study that said that if you have a portfolio of $1 million in something like the S&P 500, you can take out 4% a year without losing the initial capital over 30 years. There's like a 96% success rate. It's not perfect for Bitcoin because Bitcoin has not been around that long, so we don't really know what that kind of safe withdrawal rate would look like. And the volatility is so much higher. The gains are so much higher. It's much harder to model. But let's just go with it. Okay, in the past, you would have been fine with a safe withdrawal rate of 4%. So cost of living, $70,000. Let's say you want to retire and spend $100,000. Or maybe you want to retire rich and you want to spend $250,000. I realize for some people, this is way too much. For some people, it's not enough. But like, I think pretty much wherever you're at, you can live a pretty good life on $250,000. Now, maybe you don't have a 5-bedroom house in California, but for the majority of people, we'll just say $250,000 is enough. Okay. We have different models depending on where you think Bitcoin's price is going to go. Let's say you think it's going to actually go down a few $1,000s in the next, we'll call it not 9 years. I had done this actually in 2023. We'll say that this paper is off by a full cycle. So we're going to be looking at prices in 2031. They're talking about 2027, 2028. We're going to be looking at 2031. I realize that's kind of a weird time because it's like partway through a cycle, typically, because we would go 2025, 2029, 2033. But for some reason in this paper, they talk about 2027 and 2028 being extremely bullish. I think it's just because it takes time for these strategic reserves to continue to buy Bitcoin. So we'll run with it. We'll say 2031 is what we'll look at. And they said $1 million. That will be one of our bullish scenarios. And they said in a really bullish scenario, it would be $2 million by 2030. So we'll go with those as our bullish scenarios. But in the bearish scenarios, we'll say $100,000. It doesn't do anything for 10 years. And then $250,000, and then $500,000, and then these. Keep in mind, when I actually set this up, Bitcoin's price was much lower. It was $28,000 when I made the spreadsheet. The last time I did this, Bitcoin was around $43,000. So like these were more bullish than they are now. These are more bearish now because we've already moved up so much. So how many Bitcoin would you need? Well, at $100,000, if you're going to spend $100,000 a year and sell about 4% of your portfolio, you need about 25 Bitcoin. You basically sell 1 Bitcoin off a year. Well, that's not very easy to get to right now. That would cost you over 2.5 million. And this is extremely bearish. I don't think Bitcoin's going to be the same price in, 7 years. I think if anything, it's going to be much higher. And if it's not going to be much higher, it's probably going to be lower. Like something is going to happen that's extremely negative, like, I don't know, some kind of war or something. But I think there's like a 98% chance, 99% chance Bitcoin's much higher. So what if Bitcoin hits 500,000? Still not very bullish. I don't think it's very bullish. But you would need about 5 Bitcoin to retire. If you want to retire rich and spend about $250,000 a year, you need about 12.5 Bitcoin. In the more bullish scenario, let's say the most bullish, $2 million per Bitcoin. You need about 1.25 Bitcoin. Or if you want to spend $250K a year, you need about 3.13 Bitcoin. Now, to be clear, those are pretty expensive today. All these are pretty expensive today because Bitcoin's been on a rampage. Right now, if you want to buy 100,000 Bitcoin, or if you want to buy, 25 Bitcoin, and you think it's going to go to, $100,000, you need about $2.6 million to retire today. If you want to retire on 100K a year, and you think Bitcoin's going to go to $1 million, you need about $260,000 today in Bitcoin. Or you need to buy about $260,000. If you think it's going to go to $2 million, you need about $130K. Now, some people are going to say, well, that's unrealistic. Well, yeah, for some people it is unrealistic. If Bitcoin does a 10x, you're not going to retire on $10,000. It's just numbers, unfortunately. But the thing is, if you dollar cost average over time, you could do well. Like, you don't have to time it perfectly. You just need to be in the asset for a while. That's what a lot of people don't get. They want to buy during the bull market. But the first time I made this, I believe this is the first time I made it. October 18, 2023. Bitcoin was $28,000. $28,500. So instead of, let's say, $520,000 to retire, it would have cost $142,000. In this bullish scenario of $2 million Bitcoin where you need 1.3 Bitcoin, you need 1.25 Bitcoin, instead of $130,000, it would have cost just $35,000. So if you were making, $70,000, $100,000, you were trying to live super frugally, you could have acquired this most likely through the bear market. Over a couple of years, dollar cost averaging heavy into Bitcoin, like sacrificing. You could have gone to this point probably. It would have cost about $35,000. And this is not nitpicking. The fact is, Bitcoin was around $20,000 for, I think it was 4 or 5 months. And, we could have said $16,500, right? The cost at the bottom of the bear market. Well, instead of $35,000, it would have cost you $20,000. So if you had been working for a while, maybe you had bought something, maybe you had been dollar cost averaging in an IRA, and then you saw Bitcoin dip, you could have bought this, right? And maybe you buy something like MSTR. MSTR is up a lot more than Bitcoin over this time. If you had bought MSTR, which I think a lot more people will do during the next bear market, if we have a bear market, like it's up 2,600%. And if you think that it's going to move up in lockstep with Bitcoin and Bitcoin does another 10x, it's going to be up not 26x, but 260x. So imagine that. If you needed, let's say you think Bitcoin's going to $1 million and you need 2.5 million, well, 2.5 million divided by 260, you could have invested less than $10,000 into MSTR, this bear market, and you could retire on that. That's crazy. And what if you had been around from the last bull market, from the bottom of the last bear market? You have needed about $4,000 in this most bullish scenario. $4,000 because you would have gotten Bitcoin at about 3,200. So yeah, the fact is, if you're able to dollar cost average into Bitcoin over time, you'll probably retire. And if you have a good income, if you're able to invest a good amount, right? If you're making, if you're making $30,000 a year and you're investing $500 a year into Bitcoin, you're probably not going to be able to retire on that unless, you look at some of the very bullish scenarios. There are some people, they're saying, well, no, Bitcoin's going to take over everything. Everything's going to be priced in Bitcoin. If you have 0.01 Bitcoin, you're going to be able to retire. You're going to be able to buy a house with 0.001 Bitcoin. I know there are people saying that kind of stuff. So in those scenarios, yeah, you'll probably be able to retire on 0.01 Bitcoin. But in most scenarios, you'll need a Bitcoin. You'll need half a Bitcoin. I mean, Michael Saylor says that Bitcoin's going to $13 million. I think, he lays out the year 2045 for that. So, yeah, I mean, we're talking about 20 years of inflation as well. $13 million might be, I mean, if you look at the 14% debasement, $13 million might be more like $2 or $3 million. If you look at the 3% inflation rate, well, maybe that $13 million is more like $5 or $6 million. But of course, like, it's going to come back down to your assumptions, your lifestyle. How are you set up outside of Bitcoin too, right? Maybe, I say you need half a Bitcoin or a Bitcoin to retire. That's if you just have Bitcoin and you think Bitcoin's going up to these higher levels. Maybe you have 0.25 Bitcoin and you also have $100,000 in VOO and you have a rental property or something like that. There are a lot of assumptions that we could play with here. But yeah, I think overall, this paper, extremely bullish, saying $1 million in the next 2 or 3 years. I think that would break a lot of models. I think crazy things will happen with MSTR, with the miners, with, I don't know, with other cryptocurrencies. Like, that would be an insane scenario. So if that happens, I think we'll all be very happy. Again, if you want to trade crypto, maybe you want to put a long in, like a low leverage long, and just ride it out as long as possible. See if we get to that $1 million mark and you have like 2 or 3x leverage that entire way. I don't know. Maybe you want to try that. There's a link to BTCC underneath the video. Again, you get special sign-up bonuses and stuff for using my link. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hit subscribe if you want to see future videos like this. Let me know when you think you'll be able to retire on Bitcoin. Don't tell me how much Bitcoin you have. Don't tell me that. Also, if you made it this far in the video, comment down below what you're drinking. I think that this is a good way to weed out the people that are bots versus the real people. I mean, bots are getting a little bit smarter each day. But yeah, then, hit the like button on some other people's comments on what they're drinking. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm drinking a coffee, actually an espresso, and some water. But let me know what you're drinking down below. Thank you so much. I'll see y'all in the next one.